Time for a 30-day news roundup for the new Biden administration, fixing all of the evil policies of Donald Trump. We have here a story from Newsweek. At issue is the Biden executive order revoking a memo by his predecessor that ended catch and release at the southern border. This led Customs and Border Protection in Texas to release entire family units into the U.S. to await their court hearings, because the Trump policy had required illegal immigrants to remain in Mexico while awaiting their court dates. What this Newsweek story translates to is that opening our borders to thousands upon thousands of migrants seeking asylum in the United States without any COVID testing whatsoever. This is at stark contrast with how the major science magazines such as Scientific American and Nature magazine endorsed Joe Biden last year, claiming that he followed the science. Well, that was just a mindless catchphrase by Joe Biden. And all these science groups that endorsed Biden, they endorsed a candidate who was going to flood our country with COVID cases. Biden celebrates 50 million vaccine shots despite the mess he inherited from the Trump administration. Well, this is the problem for Joe Biden and his ability to govern. He did not inherit any mess regarding COVID or coronavirus policy from Trump. That was simply what had been quoted to him from opinion columns at the Washington Post and the New York Times. Biden is simply repeating what someone put in front of him as news opinion from these newspapers that hope to get rid of President Trump. Well, President Trump is no longer there in Washington, D.C. You don't have to keep propagandizing to get rid of President Trump. Biden on day one scrapped Trump rule that helped U.S. save $160 billion. And I wanted to focus more on things like this. The news media under Joe Biden provides context-free reporting. What you'll see from most news outlets is reports congratulating Joe Biden for his flurry of executive orders changing Donald Trump's evil policies. And then that's where the analysis stops. They simply declare Trump bad, Biden good, Biden executive orders wonderful, Trump executive orders evil. That's as far as the analysis you get from these media organizations. And we're going to go through their examples for one particular item, the NATO spending by our allies. Let's do a little refresher with that. Biden administration takes more cooperative approach to its first high-level NATO meeting. What does that mean? Well, if we go here to the NATO spending chart, you can see here that the United States pays a lion's share of NATO spending. The purpose of NATO was to provide a military defense against invasion by military forces of the Warsaw Pact, formed after World War II by the Soviet Union. The Warsaw Pact is no more, so this raises the question, what is the purpose of NATO other than to redirect American taxpayer funds to European countries? And if you know enough to ask that question, you already know the answer. NATO has new directives. But let's take a look here at what Donald Trump is being scolded for. When Trump was president, Trump scolded NATO allies for pursuing trade interests at odds with being the ally of the United States. Here, Donald Trump said Germany was totally controlled by Russia. In this story, Donald Trump scolded Germany from buying natural gas from Russia. This was in 2018. Donald Trump asked German Chancellor Angela Merkel, why is it that American soldiers were deployed all over Germany to defend Germany from Russian attack when Germany was signing all these trade deals with the Russia that we were defending them from? This is considered antagonistic to ask basic questions about trade. In the German trade deal to obtain energy from Russia, Germany specifically singled out United States energy companies and blocked them from bidding on this energy deal. Germany is totally controlled by Russia. They will be getting between 60 and 70% of their energy from Russia and a new pipeline. So, why are our soldiers there, pledging their blood to defend Germans from the people that Germany just signed massive trade deals enriching Russia so that Russia can build more tanks, jets, weapons of all kinds. Donald Trump asked these questions because these are not the actions of an ally supporting the United States. If we're spending all this money on NATO, what are we getting in return? So let's take a look at a couple of these news stories here. This is from CNBC, whose journalist seems to be on the level of Punky Brewster. President Joe Biden promised to repair what he called strained relationships with European allies and NATO partners in the wake of his predecessor's America First foreign policy. Biden said the United States will earn back our position of trusted leadership, telling the virtual audience, America is back. Now, you have to parse what Joe Biden means here. Wherever Donald Trump went across the world, Donald Trump looked for places to save money for the American taxpayer. American taxpayers were billed for NATO defense, for South Korea defense, for Japan defense. We were billed all over the world by our allies at disproportionate rates. Donald Trump saw this, and so he said, how can we obtain better deals for the American taxpayer who is footing the bill for all of this? Now, for that simple question, Donald Trump was excoriated as a monster. Joe Biden, when he promises to restore our relationships, you have to translate that to an impact on your wallet. Joe Biden is promising our allies in Asia and in Europe that he will cancel all the deals that Donald Trump signed and insisted on. When those deals are canceled, the funding for all of these programs with NATO and our defense pacts remains the same. So, if our allies are no longer required to pay extra money and the budgets remain the same, who makes up the shortfall? That's right. You, the American taxpayer, pays the difference, all so that Joe Biden can be praised for his partnership and leadership. So in the new definition of leadership, you stick the American taxpayer with the bill for all of these agreements that Biden canceled with his executive orders. Our partnerships have endured and grown through the years because they are rooted in the richness of our shared democratic values. They're not transactional. They're not extractive. They're built on a vision of a future where every voice matters. And you know what those voices are saying? Make the American taxpayer pay for all of this. And Joe Biden just brought that policy into existence. This is by David Machichuk of the Asia Times. Biden moves to restore trust with NATO allies. The rancor and bluster is gone. From now on, under the administration of President Biden, NATO will be treated as a respected ally, not a punching bag. How utterly refreshing, how novel, how truly progressive. U.S. officials are looking to project an aura of competence. No more threats and demands from the adversarial Trump administration. Instead, a message of calm consultation among allies. So you can tell several things. Dave Machichuk is angling for a job at the Biden administration. But you have to translate everything they say when they report in glowing terms about Joe Biden. Everything that this reporter is saying about Joe Biden translates to you paying more money to support all these promises that Joe Biden is making to our allies. When Joe Biden does airstrikes in Syria, when Joe Biden does military actions and deploys American troops, it's all to curry favor on a political level. And God help any of those American troops deployed in Syria or in the Middle East or in Asia if they dare fire back when attacked, because Joe Biden's team of political lawyers will sue them for war crimes under the UCMJ. But as long as Biden can deploy American forces around the world, he's patted on the back for being a good partner. Biden pledges the blood of your sons and daughters to make himself look good, to make himself look presidential. President Trump's crime was to ask, is this necessary? Is it necessary to deploy American troops to patrol a 200-year-old border dispute between Turkey and Syria? Donald Trump asked, shouldn't South Korea and Japan be paying more for their defense? Shouldn't NATO be paying more for their defense? For these crimes, Donald Trump was excoriated, but you have to remember the context, and this reporter will never provide you with that context. The context is, Donald Trump did not work for NATO. Donald Trump did not work for the European Union. Donald Trump did not work for any of our allies. Donald Trump worked for one person, and that was the American taxpayer. It's almost like they know what they're doing, continuing with the reporting. The Pentagon views the meetings as a way to reset the alliance after years of disruption and a chance to set new goals on confronting China, combating climate change, and does this look anything like the original goals of NATO, having a military defense against the Warsaw Pact? China was not a direct military threat against if the Warsaw Pact attacked. Climate change wasn't part of the Warsaw Pact as far as I know. So the goal here is to redirect excess funds from the pockets of American taxpayers into the coffers of the European Union. Never mind that the European Union already has blacklists and tariffs against all American products. So the European Union, in many ways, is at war with America and our manufacturing. The EU considers themselves our enemy when it comes to the economy and economic competition. So while we're blocked from European markets under friendly Joe Biden is going to be increasing the taxpayer commitment to funding all of these pet projects of whatever the European Union ministers come up with. In 2014, NATO committed to work towards 2% GDP for funding NATO. And here's what the senior defense official says. 2% wasn't something the Trump administration came up with. It was something that was informal. In 2014, all NATO states agreed to commit to work towards 2%. Note that phrase, work towards. Donald Trump used the carrot and the stick approach to say, we want you to commit more money to NATO spending. You're asking too much of the American taxpayer. Joe Biden comes along and says, I'm everybody's friend. Now here's the key distinction. Joe Biden is everybody's friend except the American taxpayer. Joe Biden is not the friend of the American taxpayer. He wants to curry favor with everybody else wanting our money. This is what Joe Biden voters voted for. Anyone who did not vote for Joe Biden already knew this when Joe Biden promised to restore alliances that had a dollar sound, cash register sound effect, when Joe Biden promised to cancel all these requirements of these NATO countries that Trump was threatening. You could hear the cash register sound. That was Joe Biden promising more taxpayer money to fund NATO. All of these things that Donald Trump worked on for 4 years was to save the American taxpayer money. Joe Biden wants to be everyone's friend. It makes a big difference that we now have a president who is committed to transatlantic relations, says Goldgeiger. Trump was the most anti-European president of the post-World War II era. He viewed allies as harmful. So you have to translate what they're saying here. As long as American taxpayers are fleeced every day by our allies, that's considered good partnership. A president who asks our allies to pay their fair share, well, that's just mean. And the U.S. is sending warships into the Black Sea while we're confronting Russia in a military sense in the Black Sea. We are now cheering on Angela Merkel signing energy deals with that same Russia, which enriches Russia so they can build even more military forces. Does this make any sense to anyone that we're confronting Russia on a military basis while doing everything we can to encourage our allies to give Russia money to have the best equipped or better equipped military than they had previously? Biden administration takes more cooperative approach to its first high-level NATO meeting. This is the Washington Post. The Biden administration is preparing to strike a more cooperative tone at the first meeting of senior NATO officials. 72-year-old military alliance. That's how long NATO's been around. And as long as we keep giving them money, they will have a reason to exist. The challenges are vast, from defending against Russia, the same Russia that Germany signed the energy deal with that locked out American companies. Senior official, while speaking on the condition of anonymity, why do they need to be anonymous? The Biden administration and the news media are one and the same. Trump often threatened NATO allies about their defense spending and used a bullying approach that led some world leaders to mock him. Do we really care if world leaders mock Trump if Trump was saving us money? I can answer unequivocally. The answer is no. Donald Trump was working for me, the American taxpayer, not European leaders. European diplomats would wake up to check Trump's Twitter feed to see if he had announced a sudden shift in U.S. military posture. Trump's military posture was always consistent: America first, and to ensure that American taxpayer dollars were not being wasted. Biden had halted a partial withdrawal of U.S. troops from Germany that Trump ordered. Now, this was the carrot and the stick approach by Donald Trump. Donald Trump was saying to Germany, if you're cutting exclusive energy deals with Russia, why on earth are American troops sitting there in Germany to protect German citizens with American blood? It's the most sacred thing an ally can ask of another, to have our soldiers standing in harm's way to defend Germany from a expansionist Russia. And here Germany was signing all of these deals with Russia and cutting us out. Donald Trump knew what our policy should be. American soldiers first, American taxpayers first. Joe Biden has other priorities. It's no secret that over the last 4 years, we've had some difficult discussions inside NATO. Now, what are the difficult discussions? How best to steal American taxpayer money? How best to reallocate our money? Because we're not spending it wisely enough. And Joe Biden will take that money from your wallet and spend it more wisely than you or Trump could ever dream of. Everyone who voted for Joe Biden, this is precisely what you voted for. And every one of us who watched Joe Biden campaign in the 2020 presidential election can now say, see, we told you so. Thank you.